Hi everyone! Okay, so today I want to show you how to make a haunted video game. I know, so cool. Okay, so step one, you want to find a haunted house, like a super haunted house, like the most haunted house you can find. Step two, place your game of choice in the house. Oh, and leave a sacrifice for the demons, like obviously. Make sure you leave it overnight. And step three, just collect the disc the next day and, scream as you realize its true cost. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Oh, this is so dumb.
Careful, a virus can do a lot of damage.
This is not a bathrobe, it's a spooky robe. In 2010, there's this urban legend that began to circulate on creepypasta forums about a haunted Legend of Zelda cartridge. A cartridge being what video games used to come on before streaming. My apologies, I am very old. The story, usually called Ben Drowned, goes that a college student came across an old copy of Majora's Mask that already had a saved game, simply called Ben. The game itself displays what would later become hallmarks of the haunted game genre. NPCs' movement and dialogue were distorted, the background music was different, sometimes even backwards. And most importantly, the game appeared to be reacting to the player themselves, not Link. And that's a key difference between a horror game and a haunted game, because a horror game is supposed to be scary because of its content within the game world, but a haunted game is usually scary because there's something wrong with the game itself. In Ben Drowned, the student begins to feel the effects of the game in his real life, having nightmares, shutting himself away, and constantly feeling as if the entity Ben is watching him. It's pretty cool stuff. I like the idea of a modern twist on ghost stories. It's very cyberpunk, it's very Sadako crawling out of the TV. Up until this point, haunted games existed only in these stories. The videos for them were made with mods. Or were they? They were. But this trend eventually gave rise to developers making real games that play as though they're haunted. No Players Online, created by Adam Pipe, plays as though it's an abandoned online first-person shooter. It's genuinely spooky before anything weird starts to happen. It has the same feeling as wandering around in the ruins of some forgotten space, somewhere there's supposed to be people, and there just aren't. A personal favorite is the indie dev collaboration Haunted PS1 Games. It's a compilation of totally unique games made by different developers and released for free.
Hey kid.
Who? Me?
Yeah, you dummy. You wanna play some cool video games?
Yeah, I want to play games.
To be clear, this is not a disc that goes in your PlayStation. It's a collection of indie games made to look like PS1 games. Many of the games were made during a game jam. A game jam is Iron Chef for video game developers. That is the official definition. You can quote me on that. And if you've never done a game jam, you should absolutely try it out. They're free, they're open to the public, and you don't have to know anything about programming to participate. I mean, look at my games. Does it look like I know what I'm doing? I'm still trying to learn Python, okay? Jeez.
Okay, so I was doing some digging and it looks like Cartoon Network did a whole retrospective on the OKKO Game Jam that I did in 2016. It's 17 minutes long and I'm in it for 2 whole seconds.
PS1 graphics are well suited for horror. With modern graphics, even though things are supposed to be run down or scary, they're still pretty beautiful. They have an amazing variety of textures and reflect ambient light perfectly, but with PS1 graphics, everything is flat and sharp. Environments feel symbolic, like walking around in a cave painting. Like, that's not a tree. My brain is telling me that's supposed to be a tree, but it isn't. It's something else. Haunted games vary wildly, but almost none of them are shooters. Instead, most of the games involve simply exploring spaces, solving puzzles, and allowing the game to tell a story. A haunted game title that does this well is Bleakshore. You're on this desolate, foggy island, occasionally coming across an object, and the character explains its significance. Like, that's it. And it's really interesting. On the other end of the spectrum is Sauna 2000, which starts out as a confusing Swedish tutorial for using a sauna and ends an absolute phantasmagorical mindfuck, the likes of which I've never seen in my life. A Place Forbidden is a much more classic take, exploring an old-fashioned library that looks normal, but I assure you definitely isn't. Neko Yume is about cats. Just cats. Honestly, this is the best type of horror for people like me who hate jump scares because everything builds on itself. You're not distracted by the anticipation of a jump scare, so you can really think about what's going on and get immersed in the environment. But can we agree that the idea of a haunted game is sort of weird? Where did this idea come from? How did we get here? Well, I have an idea. Let me tell you a story from a friend. His sister, who was very religious, had bought a piece of fiction. It was nothing crazy. It was just like a grocery store checkout stand paperback. Well, something about its content seriously offended her because not only did she stop reading it, she put the book outside on her porch for 3 days before getting rid of it. Something about this book had repulsed her so much that she felt the need to physically remove it from her house, as if its very presence was poisonous. This book, according to her, was cursed. The concept of a game being cursed or haunted in some way came about well before the first video game, the oldest variation dating back to 1800s American spiritualism and the invention of the Ouija board. Since Ouija boards are for supposedly connecting with the dead, they are haunted by default, because if they weren't, it wouldn't be a very good Ouija board. Other games had their haunted or cursed status thrust onto them. Dungeons & Dragons was labeled as cursed in the 1970s and 80s during the Satanic Panic, allegedly able to turn innocent young teens into raging devil worshippers. Okay, Deborah, that is what did it. It was the Dungeons & Dragons. Now, I assure you, this video is about games, but we do need to talk about smallpox, because evil is contagious. At least we think it is.
Just another little aside here. I took the time to actually fact check my talk about bubonic plague. Turns out smallpox and bubonic plague are completely two different things. Just I learned something today. That's amazing. So just a little update on that. Listen, I said I went to college. I never said I graduated.
Humans seem to have a universal concept of the transference of evil, that once something is touched by darkness, it's forever changed, and that thing is now a vector through which evil can infect others. This may be due to how our lizard brains interpret the world around us. If a water source is poisoned, a primitive person may not have understood the cause. But you're not drinking that water again. That's cursed water. In the 1300s, the bubonic plague wiped out 1/3 of the entire population of Europe. We can only imagine how traumatic that was for people. Just bodies stacked knee-high in the streets, loved ones dropping like flies. Especially terrifying because they had no idea what was causing it or how to stop it. How very relevant. Many people felt that the plague, or the Black Death as it was called, was a curse from God sent to punish them for sin. And that is quite shocking, since the popular belief today is that sinning was invented by feminists in 2015. Not surprisingly, those who lived in rural areas who were socially distant were spared from some of this devastating infection. And in Italy, they eventually started boarding people inside their homes once they started to show symptoms. So they did have some concept that this plague, this evil, was spreading from person to person. Every civilization has at some point been scarred by the horrors of plague. And I'm wondering if this universal trauma is at the root of this idea of transference. As the media we consume has progressed, it's only natural that we began to project this phenomenon into digital spaces too. After all, what is the internet but our collective mental experience? Which explains why it's such a trash fire. Media, be it books, films, and yes, even video games, are all vectors. We consume their content, and in doing so, bring them inside us. By the way, the Haunted PS1 games collection comes with way more games than I mentioned. You can go to the website and download the demo. I will stop talking about smallpox now, okay? There is something so strange though about the experience of playing a modern game made to look like an old one. The PlayStation was a big part of my childhood. I played some of the most influential games of my life on the PS1. And sometimes it's sad to think that I can never go back and relive these experiences. I can never play Parasite Eve for the first time ever again. Or Soul Reaver for that matter, or Final Fantasy VIII. You know, you go into these games in the hopes of experiencing some ghostly scare. But as the player, I am the one wandering these antiquated spaces, searching for things, searching for meaning, hoping to relive something that's lost to me. The only one acting like a ghost here is me. Damn, nostalgia is kinda spooky. Like, you're just haunting your own past. I didn't mean to make another sad video. This is not a sad video. Why can't I talk about video games without having an existential crisis? That's the real question. Literally, the only point of this video is that there's such a bunch of really cool games that I mentioned, and you should play them. I hope you enjoyed this video about haunted video games. In the comments below, please let us know if you've ever had a spooky video game experience. Let's get a digital campfire going. Okay, subscribe to the Patreon because it really helps me out, helps me keep the channel up, and I will see you all next video. Happy Halloween!